Mi gente, you already know who it is. It's Danny Limelight. And I need all of you to subscribe to According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and all other platforms.
What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to my friend. I love this guy. We literally did a podcast within a podcast off air, but hopefully we can do some of that and capture some of the magic. He is a Maverick Pro Wrestling commentator and a manager, impresario of the likes of the late great Bobby the Brain Heenan. He's the one, the only Aaron Glass. Follow that kid.
Sorry, I had to laugh because you compared me to Bobby the Brain Heenan. I don't think anyone has ever made that comparison, but I will take that as the highest compliment. Also, I do have to correct you. It's Maverick Wrestling. It's not Maverick Pro Wrestling anymore. It's been so hard with all the talents, even us like on commentary. It's been like, it's Maverick Wrestling. It's not Maverick Pro Wrestling, but then you forget. And then I still have a Maverick Pro Wrestling t-shirt. And it's like, I haven't gotten the new shirt yet. Brandon, please send it to me. Brandon Ficara, our owner. So it's like,
it's in the mail.
Yeah, it was a rebrand, but it was a small rebrand. It was just because like one of the main reasons for it is you have Millennium Pro Wrestling I forgot the name of the town. Yeah, yes. Sorry, I don't know the area very well, especially now that I'm in Orange County. And they have the same initials as us. And we were working with them, and we had a lot of the same talent. So it's like, we don't want to have the same initials. We don't want to disrespect them. They were here long before we were. And if you ever dealt with them, they're like really, wrestling has a lot of bad, reputations for promoters. They are the exception. They are very nice people and very professional people. And it was really great working with them, I have to say.
No, absolutely. Which, how did you become a lover of all things pro wrestling?
As a kid, I grew up watching, Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, the Killer Bees. I think I mentioned to you, I was a big Killer Bees fan. I think it was the outfits. Like, I thought they were so cool looking. As a very young kid, with an older brother. So we watched that. We always wanted to get the pay-per-views. My parents did not support that. I lost touch for a long time. I would see it here and there. I remember one time I was in camp. I was probably 10 years old or something. And somebody had a wrestling magazine, and I think I bought it from them or something. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. Like, I really need to start watching again, but I could never find it. My parents didn't really support it. My parents weren't like restricted, like you can't watch this. They would just make fun of it all the time. And then in high school, I was 15. It was 1996. So I was 15 and a half, if you want to get technical. I don't remember exactly when I started watching. One of the first things I do remember is the parking lot brawl at Disney, or Universal Studios, I think, where Kevin Nash lawn darted Rey Mysterio into the side of the trailer. And I looked it up actually the other night, and that was like 2 or 3 weeks after Hogan turned. So I don't know if I started watching right before Hogan turned or right after he turned. But I was like, whoa, what is this? And like, that was, I don't know if you've ever listened to Eric Bischoff's podcast, but he talks a lot.
I might have been on Eric Bischoff.
Oh yeah. There was that little thing that you did with him. One of the things that I love that he talks about is how wrestling fans love surprises, and they love when they can't tell if it's real or not. And like, that is what caught my eye with that particular segment, I would say. And I was just like, this is what is going on here. Like, I have to keep watching. And then I got into the whole NWO thing, and I started watching, and I saw the Cruiserweights, who were incredible. I was like, whoa, I never saw Ultimate Warrior do this. Like, what is this? Like, this is, and I've always been a sports fan. I'm just like, this is athletic. This is a sport. And I just loved it. And then from there, I also watched WWE or WWF at the time. And then I went down the ECW rabbit hole. The next summer I was in driver's ed, and there was a guy there who was a big wrestling fan. We started talking, and turned out he was a tape trader. So he had his whole ECW 6-hour compilation tape that had the entire like Raven and Dreamer feud, and Eddie Guerrero and Dream Malenko series of matches, and like young Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit, and I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then I realized that ECW was on at 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, depending on the week. every Saturday night, you know, on MSG or Empire Network, which we got in Rochester, New York, and I would just tape it every week because sometimes I'd actually be out. I had somewhat of a social life in high school, but you know, not much. I mean, we were the good kids. We're the ones where my parents didn't give me a curfew because they knew I wouldn't drink or get in trouble at all. They're just like, we know you're too much of a wimp to do anything, so get home when you get home.
Ooh, heat.
Yeah, they were not too worried about me. But yeah, no. So that's my very long explanation, and I was kind of like, part of me had a childhood you know connection to WWF, so like
Right.
really loved it. But Cole Cabana talked about this a long time ago on his podcast. There was something about WCW. I think it was the way it was shot.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like gritty or authentic.
Yeah.
It wasn't as glossy.
I will even tell you the way that the ring sounded. To
Right.
me, the way that the like
Yeah. That's
was
actually
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what drew me to it. And I was like, part of me really likes WCW more just because it feels less just homogenous and like less produced. I liked it more. And you know, for whatever faults I'm sure we'll get into about AEW, that's one of the things that I like about it is it feels more like WCW to me, which I actually mean that as a compliment. And I have a lot of issues with what they do sometimes, but like I like the feel of it a little bit more than WWE. It's just something. It's just a little different. Like it's just something that I can look at, and it just has a slightly different visual presentation, I would say, and I guess audio presentation.
No, absolutely. And sometimes that's it. You know, like talking about the visual presentations. I mean, I love like the old, WWF wrestling challenges and
Mm-hmm.
superstars and what have you. And they literally felt like superstars, pardon the pun, right?
Yeah.
Like, and but also I loved, oh God, William Regal. I remember the first time I saw William Regal on WCW Worldwide with the rotating ring,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh, and uh, this is like a come to whatever deity that anyone subscribed to moment for me when I hit
Yeah.
him saw when I saw him hit the butterfly suplex.
Oh yeah.
Ah,
He was. I don't think I appreciated him as much as I do now, just because
right.
he didn't have the body, he didn't have the presentation. His trunks were really boring, but like he was so smooth, and everything hurt or looked like it hurt, and probably did hurt for a lot of guys. If someone with Finley, then obviously that stuff hurt. And he always had that look like he just smelled a fart or something when he was walking through the
Yes.
ring. Like that thing. It was just like it looked like someone farted. Like that was the British look, I guess. But
Yeah.
I do think I appreciate him more now, and knowing his backstory and like everything he's been through. It's just
Hmm.
there are certain wrestlers that like you feel like you took for granted. Like I'm watching the AEW Dark Side of the Ring on Brian Pillman. Sorry, something just popped up on my computer. And I only saw him really post accident. So like I didn't
Oh.
know a lot of like the history. I would see things from ECW and I'd be like, okay, that's interesting. Like, what is he doing? But I feel like had I started watching wrestling a year before or even 6 months before I did,
Right.
I would have seen the loose cannon gimmick and I would have been like, is this real? Like the same kind of thing where it's blurring that line of real and what is produced. And I love that. And
Uh,
what I feel like we're missing today, but that's neither here nor there.
Pillman is like definitely my top 10, like
Really?
of all time. Like, yeah, because I got to see the evolution, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
him with the Bengal trunks and coming
Mm-hmm.
out because he was a Cincinnati Bengal football player and whatever. He came out like there was one deal and talk about visual presentations like the old WCW fucking long ramps, like
Yeah.
long ramps.
Love the
It was
long ramps.
yes, that led right into the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have like he'd be flanked with like two like a chorus line of on each side of like cheerleaders that would like actually like with the pom poms and shit like that, right? And then when they turned him heel with like Steve Austin and they became the fucking Hollywood Blondes and doing the whole movie gimmick. Like I
Yeah.
loved I love that, right? So I saw every incarnation of Pillman, and it's funny because Pillman kind of idolized and grew up through Stampede with Owen Hart, you know.
Right.
So he's in that level, and when people talk about like amazing factions, nothing against the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen are great. Nothing against DX. DX was great.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing against the NWO, great. But for me, that latter day Heart Foundation fucking ensemble of Bulldog, Pillman, Brett, Owen, you know,
Anvil.
yeah, it's just amazing. Like those
It was
guys.
really great. I mean, it worked because it felt like a shoot. Like it felt like Bret Hart was pissed at the US, and I think he was actually. Like, I think that's why it worked. And like Austin was like the perfect foil for them because he represented a lot of where the culture was going,
right.
For better or worse. Like not here to judge that, but like I feel like it just worked so well. And I would love to have seen Pillman wrestle more, but like in his prime at least. But that is one of those factions that you're just like, wow, like we won't have that again. Or incarnation. I was interested when they were doing like the new foundation with like Natty and Harry Smith and T.J. Wilson and and maybe Teddy Hart at some point. But like I don't love when they reiterate on gimmicks unless there's like a real connection there. And I do agree that that's one of those factions that one of my favorites. And like I like DX, but I felt like at a time when the NWO was at its peak, and if you take NWO at its peak and DX at its peak, I'm going with NWO.
Yeah, and the thing about the NWO, right? The thing with DX, because they had the ear of the promoters at the time, Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff, they got a lot more legs, right? So you might not like most people will, say the Shield is one of the greatest factions of all time. Right, and I think there's a little bit of recency bias, but also
I do.
Could do things that maybe a Heart Foundation, '97 couldn't do with even all of the talent that encompassed that particular group.
Yeah, no, and it's also like it's when I do think they have kind of a shelf life with these factions, right? Because eventually somebody's going to get over that you need to split off. Nation of Domination with The Rock, right? Like you get to a certain point where you have to split off one of the main members because they're going to get over somehow. And when you start adding new members like NWO, you kind of dilute like the appeal, I would say. So I do think that like I do like factions, but I also feel like they have a shelf life. And if I'm looking at AEW, it seems like everyone's in a faction at this point.
Hey! Don't tell that to New Japan because they are faction heavy.
I guess it's the
works,
of the company. I mean, I do think that there's that, but like it's tough when you have so many factions and like some are seen as lesser than the others, right? They're not on even ground. So it's like, and you can only do so many 8-man matches or 10-man matches or whatever it is. Like there's a limit.
Again, what is this? We're at Saturday. Tomorrow is Double or Nothing, and we've got a fucking big ass tag. Which, oh my god. Okay, they're doing a fucking breakup and dissension angle so soon, like literally 2 weeks.
Right, which makes me think that the Pinnacle can't lose because I think it's great. I think both factions are really good, and I don't know if I want to see either one break up, but maybe like Jericho needs to go on tour or something. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I get that, but I also just believe now Jericho kind of give a little bit. He kind of kayfabed himself, or I don't know how into the storylines he is, because we were told that the Inner Circle, right, was guys that he handpicked, right, like, to fucking lead his age of AEW to the promised land, right, him as the champion and whatever. That's what we were told, right? Well, going in, like the go home fucking promo that he did for this upcoming pay-per-view of Double or Nothing, he literally goes like, they told me that they were going to put me in a faction, and I kind of was aghast that they would put me in a faction. I was like, then what is it? You've literally told us for fucking 2 years that you handpicked these guys. Then now,
you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, and you're not doing them any favors unless okay, maybe he is playing all of us, and he's going to go heel, and the rest of Inner Circle is going to go face. That would be that's me giving him the benefit of the doubt, which maybe is not correct. But maybe that's what he.
But isn't he a heel already?
No, they went face. He apologized for their previous actions. They're totally face. which I think with Jack Swagger, that's a little bit, or Jake Hager, I think that's a little bit hard to do. But
Well, and it's fun, right? Because like the whole time, like I've lambasted like the WWE for kind of taking away Nakamura's theme, right?
Mhm.
And then taking away Robbie Roode's theme, where because it was very sing-songy and whatever. But then
Yeah.
also, I could not decipher where the fuck, in terms of traditional pro wrestling storytelling of heel and face, where Jericho was on the spectrum, because you had the fucking crowd singing along, which again, my arguments over Vince changing the fucking themes is almost at nil.
I think that like I get the feeling that they probably deep down they knew they couldn't keep him as a heel the entire time, and also when people are singing along but there's no crowd, like it's just people talent. Why is talent singing along? Like if they really wanted to sell him as a heel, they probably should have told the talent don't sing along to his theme song, even if the crowd is doing it. So when you have no crowds at the show, just don't sing with him. Like that just seems logical. But maybe they were gradually turning him face, because I do remember there was a promo a few weeks ago where they're like, oh, we apologize for everything we've done. So it's sometimes a face turn, a heel turn can be kind of really subtle. With them, I felt like it was kind of blatant. Maybe that's best. I don't know. But I do think there are aspects of AEW that I really love, and there are aspects I'm like a little cringy. I don't know if you saw the thing about Cody Rhodes doing. I don't know if he was joking or not, but he said something about doing a focus group for his promos. And the marketing professional in me can like appreciate that, but the wrestling fan in me is just like, just don't tell us that at least. Like, just make it organic. Like, make it a little bit more organic. And like, I understand the argument for not scripting promos, but I also understand the argument for scripting promos, because if you have guys like The Rock and Steve Austin who don't need a script, then you're set. But there are some guys who just don't have it, or don't have their character down, or maybe they haven't been given enough guidance or experience, and they need that scripting. So, I can see it both ways.
But see the thing about it, right? Because those problems have always persisted through the pantheon of pro wrestling since like Gotch Hackenschmidt, right? Like that's literally been a thing. But usually, you put that person with a manager, right? If they scripted promos, we would have never gotten a Bobby Heenan. We would have never gotten a fucking Paul Bear. We would have never, like all of these.
Or an Ultimate Warrior, for that matter. I mean, his promos, as when I was a kid, were like, oh my God, these are amazing. You look back and say, this is nonsensical, but you wouldn't have had that if he had a manager.
Yeah, 100%.
For better and worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. So, yeah, Cody, Cody is a sweetheart of a guy. I remember going to a Championship Wrestling from Hollywood taping where after he won the NWA title, and like he sees me with a different Harley Race shirt that I'm different than the one that I'm wearing now. Because fucking Harley Race, hell yes. But he was like, oh, that's cool. And I tell him like, your dad would be so proud of you. He's like, thanks, dude. And he gives me the fucking 10 pounds of gold as a fucking to take the photo. And
that's still pretty cool.
My mind still, 2-3 years removed, still can't grasp. I have a replica NWA title here, but I held the actual fucking 10 pounds of gold.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
With Cody.
And like that's the thing. Like I wonder if some of this is like his responsibilities have changed a lot since then, right? Like he's now the CEO of a $1 billion company, or at least they're backed by billions of dollars. So it's that has a national TV deal. I'm sure that affects the way it has to affect you in a certain way. You have to be more professional and you have to be more buttoned up. So I'm sure that has changed probably his outlook. I think there are times where AEW can be a little bit of the Cody show, if I'm going to be honest. And when I felt like Brandy was overshadowing the women's division, that really bothered me, because I'm like, you've wrestled, but you're not on the same level as Britt Baker or Hikaru Shida or any of these women,
right?
And also
that did the Queen gimmick, that did the Freddie Mercury gimmick. I wanted more of her and less of Brandy.
There was just, and like that's the thing. It's like I understand you're the chief branding officer or whatever, but like there's recognizing what's best for your company is maybe not you all the time. right? And like, I don't know if people see that. And, you know, people talk about how, like, you know, when you're in charge and you want things done a certain way, it's just easier to do it yourself. So I guess I get that perspective, but it's also like you have to give people, like, it seems like like AEW has a lot of runway financially and both like ratings wise. They don't have to crush it day one. So you can give people some time to develop. You don't need to put Cody front and center or Brandy front and center all the time. And you can let these people develop. And like, there are certain guys who and girls who have like obviously evolved from that, you know? And I think that like they are making some stars. I think Darby Allin's a good example. You know, Hikaru Shida's another one. Britt Baker, I think, is really coming to her own. You know, I think Sammy Guevara is going to take it to the next level. Like, there's a lot of that, but that means some of the old guard, some of the CEOs have to step back a little bit and give them that room. And I think they're starting to. I've also liked that they've at least somewhat changed Rusev's, you know, gimmick. When he was just a big nerd, I didn't really understand what they were doing. Like, I get that you love video games. I work in gaming. I get it. I appreciate it. But like, doesn't really make him all that intimidating. And now that they're just like making him as like this just brute, like, I feel like that works so much better for him. But,
Yeah, you know, it's weird, right? Like, as I age a little bit more, my wrestling tastes are almost like they agree a lot of Jim Cornette. Like a lot of it, but then I also like, you know, I'm not gonna believe everything that he says and does hook, line, and sinker. There's some horrible misogynistic things, whatever.
yeah.
But like, you know, you can't take away. It's not like a Benoit like scenario where, you know, like you can just erase him. Like Jim Cornette, I think good for the business. But I also like Colt Cabana. I think Colt Cabana is like
Right.
one of the great. So, you know, I'm there. I'm all over the place in terms of my.
Cornette's an interesting subject because I feel like he's what happens when somebody who's a lot older tries to be woke. And in certain ways, I think he is. I think he is very anti certain aspects of the alt-right. But then he says things which are like, I don't know if they're meant to be malicious or they're just insensitive. And like, I don't know, but he doubles down. I think that's the problem. He doesn't just like, oh, okay, you know, like, it's kind of admit what you don't know, right? And as I've gotten older, I've been a little bit better about this, contrary to who Aaron Glass is on the microphone. I've gotten a little bit better at this, where I'm like, okay, I was wrong, or I don't understand, or I'm not familiar with this at all, right? And then I don't think Jim Cornette were able to do that. And I think that his takes, there's a lot of truth to what he says, but there's also an aspect of his mindset is still not acknowledging that the business has already been exposed to a certain extent, right? Like, and I'm talking about before the Attitude Era, when, you know, Vince McMahon says to, you know, the governor of New Jersey that things are not, you know, this is fixed, you know, just so he can avoid taxes, right? Like, so the shine is off a little bit, and you have to acknowledge that, and you have to play within that. Do I still think that I don't love when things are completely unbelievable? It depends what it is, right? Like, The Undertaker's not really believable, but I enjoyed that. Like, some of the broken Matt Hardy stuff I enjoyed. Although I also like the big money Matt stuff too. So like, I don't know. But you know, I do think there's some truth to it. Yeah. I just think that there's also there's no room for people to have different tastes. And like, to me, there's certain things I don't love. Right. I will see deathmatch wrestling and I'll be like, some of it is intriguing, like the spots, I'm like, oh, ooh. But I'll be like, long term, I don't think I can watch this because it's a little uncomfortable for me. And it's also, from a storytelling perspective, where do you go from here? Like, do you have to murder the guy to get a pin? I don't know anymore.
Right. So, but you know, it's funny because like that used to be the kind of like gaga of a certain generation, right?
Right.
You know, the FMW, ECW, XPW style, right? Now it's just flippy shit wrestling where no moves matter because you can, like, here's the, like, I don't want anybody to use a spear outside of Goldberg. He's the only one that does it believable, right? And if a DDT can crack the skull of fucking Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at the Boston Garden, why the fuck is it a transition? Yeah, no, I agree. Let's not even talk about super kicks and Canadian destroyers. I feel like that's kind of like those death matches. I mean, like I said, I was a huge ECW fan. I think there's
there's a difference between having a barbed wire match here and there in a show or as the main event versus having every match be like Tournament of Death. And there's also difference between Terry Funk and a backyard wrestler. I think we can all agree on that, right? So I think there is an aspect of its personal taste. And I don't besmirch those who enjoy, deathmatch wrestling. Do what makes you happy. And if the athletes are, doing what being true to themselves, great for them. It might just not be my cup of tea, right? Like I don't see a problem with that. But I do think that there's a lot of what you say, and there are certain friends of mine who are, maybe are current wrestlers or former wrestlers who are a lot more fired up about the way the current product is and how it kind of shits on everything they've done. And I can see how that would offend me if I were somebody who had put my body on the line for 20, 30, 40, whatever it is years. As an announcer and as somebody who has helped, I put the shows together, I've done the managing and I've done announcing. I haven't put myself at the same risk. Like maybe my sanity I've risked just dealing with everything. But even financially, I haven't really put myself out there. So it's like, it's easier for me to divorce myself from the emotional aspect of it and say, okay, that's just not for me. But I can understand why somebody, like a Cornette who has put his body on the line in certain ways and blew out both of his knees falling off a scaffold, might get upset. But also understand that things change and not like, just like, the old school video game nerd, who's like stuck in the 80s who like, hey, why are graphics so important and gameplay doesn't matter? Okay, some things taste change. I don't know what to tell you other than that. So it's kind of just like find what you like. There's so much wrestling now too that like you can probably find what you like, maybe to a certain extent.
What wrestling in 2020, 2021 interests you right now?
Okay, so I don't watch a lot of Raw or SmackDown. I think some of it is just the time investment. Honestly, it's just too much. I'll watch AEW here and there. I watch some Impact, partially really to see Chris Bay because I think he's so incredibly talented. And I'll watch Ring of Honor. I like some of the stuff they've done. They've brought in some people who I really like Wheeler Yuta and Tyler Bateman, and I guess he's just Bateman now. And I really like they brought in Freddie Ahai a little bit. And I had the privilege of managing Freddie Ahai, and I think he's somebody you would like a lot just because of his presentation and the grittiness of what he does and the believability. It just looks like everything he does hurts. Kind of like a William Regal in a lot of ways. I like that about Fred. But I love NXT. I'm a big Cross guy, carrying Cross. I'm sure that won't surprise anyone. But I like what NXT does because I feel like it is more of what I like. It's more, I hate to say indie style, but I do like indie style wrestling with good storytelling. That's what I want to see.
It's funny because, for anybody that was in the SoCal scene pre-pandemic, you can argue that AEW is a glorified bar wrestling PWG.
Yeah, my issue, bar wrestling has all sorts of issues we won't go into right now. I didn't always enjoy the shows because it was so hot and you couldn't sit down. And I'm a lazy old 40-year-old man, so with back issues. So that was kind of a thing. But I do think there's aspects of that, but with more of a national pull, and there's more of a talent pool. Once they did bring in Brian Cage and all those guys, yes, I do see that. And Luchasaurus, like we worked with Luchasaurus many, many times. So, there are certain guys that we've had the privilege of working with. Brandon Cutler, Darby Allin, all those guys. I can see that perspective. I do think the presentation is more glossy and it's more appropriate for TV and it's more long-term storytelling. I think with bar and with almost every indie, you don't get long-term storytelling.
Right.
And, I don't know if you've ever listened to the podcast, The Card is Going to Change. It's the main guy is John Thorne. He's the owner of AIW in Cleveland, which is one of the bigger indies.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about how, they like to stress storytelling and character development. And you don't see that on the indies. And I totally agree with him. I think that we've wanted to do that more and more at Maverick, But the challenge has been we don't run every month. We don't have a TV show. We don't know when our next show always is, or who came from this show that knows what this is going on here. Like we've tried to build storylines and some factions, and it's been hard because it's like also when you're an indie promotion, you don't know who's going to be available day to day, week to week, month to month. Someone could sign a contract or someone's booked that day, and then you have to go to plan B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever it is. And I think storytelling gets really challenging unless you can get a core of wrestlers who are committed to it and an organization that's committed to it. So,
well, that's why I had Damian Dragon, former ECWA Super 8 winner, and he won it literally in his retirement match. And even the, he came out, every entrance, because it's a tournament, right? So every entrance for each of the tournament matches, he came out. He started out at the character that he portrayed at the beginning of his career, then the second, and then the commentator was able to pick up on that. I think the East Coast, because there are so many, indies, as well as, like we're talking, people that watch Bruno, like are a generation removed from people who went to the Garden to see Bruno, or Delaware, or wherever that, the Capitol Wrestling office was, right? So I think I think the East Coast in terms of wrestling paramount, whether you're talking amateur, Greco-Roman, what have you, right down to professional wrestling and indie wrestling, that I think they do it better, and not to say that the LA, Los Angeles, California scene, we have our rich history of the Grand Olympic Auditorium and, Judo Jean LaBelle and Eileen Eaton, and, who didn't start from this territory, the Guerreros, the Roddy Pipers, Superstar Billy Graham, Andre, Muhammad Ali, right? We have our rich history, but the East Coast, I mean, you're a Syracuse guy. So, right?
Rochester. Do not insult me. Syracuse is a hellhole.
Yeah, Rochester. I'm sorry. The home of the late great Brody Lee, John Huber, right?
I think we went over the list. Brody Lee, Dalton Castle, Dick Justice, China, Gorilla Monsoon, Colin Delaney, a whole. Oh, I think Cheech, Up in Smoke, Cheech and
Marin?
What was that?
Cheech Marin.
Oh, no, I meant Cheech and Cloudy. Yes, they're also like one of them is now in World's Greatest. To Infinity and Beyond with Colin Delaney. But yes, anyways, yes, it's a rich history for not a major city. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I like it. Isaiah Perez says hello again. Hello, Isaiah.
Hello, Isaiah.
Yeah, glad to have you with us. So I want to. How did you get involved with Maverick?
It's actually a funny story. Okay, let's go back. I had a friend from Boston. For my time in Boston, I went to college in the Boston area, and then I stuck around Boston for about 9 years afterwards. And I met my friend Steve, who ended up moving to LA. He is an actor and a producer, but he's also a big wrestling fan. And one of the things that we bonded on was wrestling and playing WWF No Mercy on Nintendo 64. So yes, we had a lot of matches. I beat him more than he beat me. I just wanted to let you know. So he moved out here, and he made friends with this guy, Brian Farmer, who was a director. He's directed a bunch of horror movies and wrestler. And they decided to start a wrestling promotion. And the first show they ran was called Movie City Wrestling. That was the name of the company. And I think the main event was Chavo Guerrero against Paul London, which was a little bit like ironic given my relationship with Paul London these days. I talked to Paul a lot. So it's like very strange because I wasn't part of it at that point. So after the first show, like the next month, Steve reached out to me. Steve knew that I was a big wrestling fan. He also knew that I had just finished a master's in marketing. And I was going on to do my MBA. So I was in graduate school in Rochester, University of Rochester. Go Yellow Jackets. So I had just done what's called an MSBA, a Master's in the Science of Business Administration and Marketing, very analytics-based and very data-oriented, a lot of stats. And I decided to stick around in Rochester to do an MBA with a focus in brand management. So he knew I had a business background. He knew I was a wrestling fan. He knew that I was somebody he was friends with and wanted to work with. So he said, hey, would you like to help us out? Like maybe help with some of the creative, maybe some of the marketing plan, all these things. So that's how I initially became involved with, at the time, Maverick Pro Wrestling. We were deciding on a new name, actually, because they didn't like Movie City. So we went back and forth, and Brian came up with Maverick Pro Wrestling and kind of worked. We wanted something that was a little reminiscent of Evolve. That was kind of our inspiration. So I don't know where Brian came up with Maverick, but hey, it worked. So we went with that. And then time went on. We had all sorts of, great shows that they put together, but I was always on the East Coast for all of them. I didn't get to be at any of the shows. So I helped put together the card. I helped put together a lot of the promos. I would write scripts, which I know we just talked about scripting, but it was more like, hey, this is where we should go from here to here to here. These are the points we want to get. This is how we build story, all these things. And like, I would give my input on what talent I think we should use and who we should bring in. And they, I was actually listened to a lot of the time, which was really, really nice. And it was really fun. It was frustrating. There were aspects of it which were frustrating, especially because I couldn't be on the West Coast with them. And, that means communication was harder. We weren't doing Zoom back then. So, and then as time went on, I actually ended up moving to LA for a job in esports. So I initially got a job. I finished my MBA, wasn't finding anything on the East Coast, and I moved to LA to do work at a startup for esports. And I could now be involved with Maverick firsthand. And the first show I got to attend live was the one where we needed to crown a new champion because of a falling out with somebody who is no longer part of the industry. He's been kind of chased out for certain behavior. And so we were going to crown a new champion, and it was James Storm versus now Killer Cross, now Karrion Kross. And James Storm was somebody we were able to bring in like last minute, and it was really exciting. And he was not at all what I expected. I had heard, maybe he's difficult. Not at all. Super nice, polite gentleman. And I've actually found that a lot. There are certain people in this industry who I had preconceived notions of that I was very wrong about. And I was happy about that. So we brought in, so that was the first show I got to attend. And then I think it was that show or the next show, there was this whole thing where like, there was something about ownership. We were doing like, there was something about the title, and Brian, the booker at the time, pitched something to Sean Black. And he was like, Sean, I want you to get in the ring and say that you bought the company. And Sean was doing this whole thing where he always talked about Death Row Records. So he's like, I bought the company and I'm renaming it Death Row Wrestling. And I was like, originally Brian was, I think, going to be the one to get in the ring with him and just be like, hey, no, you're wrong. And then, they would get into some kind of feud. Brian didn't want to do it. He's like, I got too much going on. I'm too busy, which as the booker, he was very busy. Josh, you go do it. And I was like, I've never been in the ring. I've never cut a promo. I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like, don't worry about it. Just go. So he's like, you can talk. Go in there and talk. So I got in the ring and, Sean did his thing on the mic. I did my thing on the mic. There was a pull apart between us, which thank God, because if he ever actually got his hands on me, I don't think that would have ended well for me. So we did a pull apart. But the crowd was really into it. They were like, let them fight, let them fight. And little do they know I'm not a wrestler, but I don't look like one. But anyways, they just were like really into it. So like Brian was just like, I want to do more with this. So the next show, I was going to get in the ring and talk about how, this is Maverick Pro Wrestling, the ownership hasn't changed. This is who owns it, blah, blah, blah. And, we're here, we're not going anywhere. And Sean, fall in line kind of thing. And then Sean came up and hit me in the back with a chair. And first of all, so, that made me nervous. I'd never taken a bump, never done anything. And I probably shouldn't admit that because, please do not get in the ring if you've never taken a bump. This was something that we went over, we talked about. Sean knew where a good area. And the fact that I worked with Sean was what I think made it fine because he is a professional. But I learned quickly never to take another bump. I was not trained for it. It was not a good decision on my part. I think I did a disservice to both, the talent, the fans, and the product. And I just don't think it was a good idea. So, we went from there, but people were interested. So, the next idea was I was going to pick a wrestler to represent the company, maybe Brian, maybe someone else, because Brian is a trained wrestler. So it was like I was going to, pick somebody to represent the company to fight for Maverick against Sean. And then it kind of devolved from there. We changed ownership. So the storyline got dropped. And then it ended up that, I was, talking backstage with the new ownership and Brian was still part of the company. He was still the booker. And they're like, hey, I pitched them an idea for a heel manager, not for me, for someone else, being like, let's call it, the glass ceiling, because they've been held down by these moronic fans and management who fears their power and their intelligence. And, I was like, the character should be like pretentiously intellectual and think he's superior, but also be kind of a mark, like a smart mark. And, I think I told you this, Brian just looked at me, he's like, gosh, that's you. Like, I wrote it for someone else. We had someone in mind and they weren't available. And they were like, Brian's like, why don't you just do it? Like, it sounds exactly like who you are every time you piss me off. So like, just double down on that. So I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And, I cut a promo and people actually hated me. So that was good, which for once I actually enjoyed it. And, there were a lot of ways I felt like I was out of my element. I wasn't trained to be a manager. And my ring positioning, I wanted to make sure I wasn't, distracting from the match, but I still wanted to be involved and help. And in the very limited capacity we did it, it worked. But then we had another ownership change and Brandon Ficarra came in and he said, I've heard, the promos are good. But like, fitting them in, like, when we have trouble, building recurring story. And like some of the people I've been managing, like Fred Yehai, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have him back, just because of other applications. And then Sean Black was made to be my bodyguard, which was kind of ironic. And I was like, I know firsthand what he's capable of, and I've seen the light, and he's been held back just like I have. So, but Brandon said to me, he's like, why don't you do commentary? Like, he's like, instead of doing 5 minutes every show, I'd like you to be a voice of the show and, be on commentary the whole time. And so that's how I ended up doing color commentary, along with my broadcast partner, Alex. Alex had more of a broadcasting background in sports. I had more of a wrestling knowledge. So they thought he would do the play-by-play, I'd do the color. We would kind of blend the two sometimes where he would, not know the name of a move. So I would jump in. It fit very well with that, that smart mark character and pretentious, I know more than you kind of thing. So I would talk down to him and say, no, that move is actually, a thrust kick or whatever, or a savate kick or whatever it is, and just correct him on this like minutia, which was maybe correct, but also kind of obnoxious. So it worked. And then, I don't know if you know, Avi Marino, she was like, Kathy Campanelli, Kathy from HR. I think we all know her. She did some commentary with us sometimes. She was the ring announcer, but she also needed a bigger role. I mean, she's so talented, and beyond talented, she's one of those people who you work with and you're like, I want to work with her more because she's professional. She helps promote the show. There's certain people like that, and you're just like, I want to find more for them. And like, here we are, this small show, and she's bigger than we are. Like, we should be doing more with her. So she would start to kind of guest on commentary with us. And I think eventually we were going to transition to either a 3-person team, or maybe her and I on commentary. And then the pandemic happened. Or she went to NXT during the pandemic, or maybe right before the pandemic. And it just, I forgot the timing, but it was just like, okay, well, it's a moot point now because we can't run a show. That's how I did commentary. And I think eventually I'd probably transition more to play-by-play, because I've never been a wrestler. So having me on color commentary is maybe a little bit, maybe it's taking away from like somebody who's actually been in the ring, other than a really poor chair shot that I should never have done. And I apologize to the wrestling community and all of the talent for that. That should have been someone else. But I think that would be, maybe the natural evolution would be for me to go to play-by-play, but I've never done it. So I'm a little nervous. And I do like doing the character stuff because I like being a jerk. So,
do you draw upon any like inspiration? Is
I
something
mean,
you use for what you do?
a little bit of everything. I think, there's Jim Cornette and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and of course Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman's one of my favorites. I think we've talked. I was ECW the markiest mark of all when I was in high school. So, Paul Heyman's, also an inspiration. And then a little bit of like Damian Sandow's, savior,
Yes,
intellectual savior,
unwashed Mathis.
or
Yes.
the genius Lenny Poffo, all of
Yes.
those kind of elements. When I was managing, I wanted to do more of like Gary Hart type stuff because I had read his biography, which you can never find.
Yes.
Talk to me later. I have a PDF of it. It is so good. It is so good. I have to find it, but it was a friend of mine from college. When I was in college, okay, going back one story.
Let's do it.
I was in college. I think my freshman year of college, I didn't have a TV yet in my dorm, or maybe I didn't have cable. I forgot which one. And I had made some friends in a different hall, but none of them were wrestling fans. They were all too cool for wrestling. And they're like, "You're a weirdo." So I literally walked up and down their hall saying, like, "Is anyone going to watch SmackDown? Is anyone going to watch SmackDown?" And I made a lifetime friend, my friend Matt DiCarlo and Mike Hertz, and they were like, "We're going to watch SmackDown." And we sat and we watched SmackDown. And that is actually Matt is actually the one who sent me the PDF of Gary Hart's book, because he's like, "I've been getting into like some of the territory stuff and some of the old school stuff that I missed. And this book is fantastic, but you can't find it in print." So he sent me a PDF of it. And then with Mike and Matt, we went to a whole bunch of Ring of Honor shows, which are now like, we got to see, I think it was an Iron Man match between Bryan Danielson, or American Dragon Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, whatever you want to call him. And I believe it was, and Doug Williams.
Oh my gosh.
It was, seeing the Chaos Theory live. Oh my God. He was so good. And we got to see so much else. Samoa Joe was on that show. AJ Styles, Amazing Red. There was like a scramble match. There was so much that we got to see, and it was incredible. Alexis Lurie, who is now Mickey James, was on the show. And we got to see, like, we went to a couple of Ring of Honor shows. We went to an ECW house show where I met Fonzie. He was walking out of the bathroom and said, "The shitter's broken." That's what he said to me. It was really, really charming. He was at the Roxy nightclub in Boston. So we went to that show. We went to go see Beyond the Mat when it came out in theaters with my brother and my cousin, who were not really wrestling fans, but they really enjoyed it. Like, it was really fun. So like, I had that group of friends in college who were the wrestling fans, and we were the misfits. We would play Raw versus SmackDown a lot, and the N64 games, and it was just a lot of fun. So sorry, that was my side story. So yes, Gary Hart was another one I'd love to see more of. He was like a full service manager. He actually managed their finances and all those things. Yes. I think Paul Ellering did the same thing with the Road Warriors.
With the Road Warriors, 100%.
I'm starting to see a recurring thing, but yeah.
Road Warriors, Rick Rude, all of them. Like, there was Jake the Snake, I believe. They were all in a faction, and then the obviously Hawk and Animal broke off, and we get the current day Road Warriors and what have you.
And they were all from like the same area of Minneapolis, right? And they were all like John Nord, the Barbarian, was also part of that, I think, and like maybe Axe and Smash.
Darso for sure.
Darso maybe. Okay, maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm a big AWA guy.
I've heard you talk about AWA with Brandon.
Harley started out there, obviously Larry the Axe Henning, which was Harley's partner, Mr. Perfect's dad, Vern Gagne. You want to talk about a fucking dropkick. Not to say that Okada's isn't great. Not to say that Bob Holly's isn't great. Not to say that
Paul London,
the drop salt, right? The drop salt.
Good.
But fucking Vern Gagne's dropkick though, where he fucking shoots you off the rope, like, and he literally spins off and takes you, takes a flat back bump with it. Like, it's fucking amazing. It looks amazing. And of all the things, and I just attribute it to recency bias, where, when people talk about, like, somebody was like, "Oh, I'm an old school wrestling fan. Like, I remember the Attitude Era."
Right.
Again, recency, because yes, that was 20 years ago, but pro wrestling kind of spans deeper than that, is what I'm saying.
Really? Wrestling's been around since the Carnival days? What are you talking about?
Vince McMahon. Good shit, pal.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's such a caricature. Like, I look forward to the day when he's not in charge, but also at the same time, like, he's such a character. Like, what do you do without him? Like, I don't know. And there are some very light rumors, which I don't think there's any truth to, about them selling the WWE, which I don't think will ever happen. But
I've heard such things as well.
Okay, as somebody who, I think we can all be honest here, like we
Okay.
can all talk about our career aspirations for a second. I have a professional career. I have, like I said, the 2 masters, which also, by the way, figures into my character because I talk about it a lot. So it makes the pretentiousness a little bit more believable, and it's legitimate. I do have two master's degrees. So I have a profession. I have a career. I have that going on. I love wrestling. I would love to do that full time, maybe combine the two and do the business aspect of wrestling, brand management within wrestling, whatever. But there are stories you hear about maybe going to Stanford and working there that might not be the most healthy environment. So there's part of me that's like, I'd love to see them get sold and be in, have a healthier, culture to it, so to speak.
Be a star, damn it. Be a star.
Yeah, right. No bullying, right? Except unless you're JBL, then you can bully.
I think the same way, like when they were running that, they were also doing the Piggy James, aka Natalia farting gimmick.
That's just why, like, you talking out of both sides of your mouth. Like, we go back to that. You mentioned, by the way, sorry, I'm going to go on rants. By the way,
Go for it.
I should have given this disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast. I am the king of non sequiturs. So, but you mentioned Bob Holly and his dropkick. I had mentioned before, there were people in wrestling who I had met, who I had a preconceived notion of, and then I met them and I was completely wrong. Bob Holly is actually a perfect example. We brought him in to face Killer Cross. And that's hey, I can send you the link on that on
yes.
YouTube. Well, if you look at the Maverick, the Maverick channel, the lighting was not great for that show. Brandon had just come in and he wanted to completely change the aesthetic of how we presented things. He wanted to invest more in production because you know him. He's been in film. He's been in TV. You've seen My Name is Earl. You've seen Brandon, he has that. And he's like, a lot of indie promotions look like crap. I want this to look good. I want this to look professional. And I don't want to put my name on a product that doesn't look professional. So we invested in that. Unfortunately, the lighting on the first show, we maybe overlit the ring, underlit the crowd. It was just like the lighting wasn't even, but it's still a great match. And it's Bob Holly versus Cross. And Paul was our booker, is still our booker, but he had, become the booker. Unfortunately, he couldn't be at the show because of a family emergency. So he had to go back to Texas. His mom broke her foot, I think, if I remember correctly. And he wanted to take care of her. So he trusted Cross because he and Cross recommended Paul to us. And Cross obviously knows what he's doing. He's a brilliant mind for the business. So Cross was kind of the locker room leader of the show. So Bob Holly is there and Cross is talking to everyone before the show. I'm listening. I'm standing there. Not much to say. I mean, I'm, intimidate. Scarlett was there too. Like she was part of the show too. And I'm just like, okay. And then Bob Holly raises his hand and says, excuse me, is it okay if I say something? And we're just like, you're Bob Holly. Yeah. Seriously. Oh my God. Say whatever you want. Just don't hurt me. And he's like, and he just told us, make sure to respect the ref's count. You don't want to make the refs look, incompetent or make them. And I have never heard anyone talk about that. And I was just like, he's right. But he was just, who is this guy who is just so, he's a gentleman. And I was just like, I did not expect that at all. And I had heard, Paul London had worked with him in WWE and really liked him. And I was like, okay, Paul vouches for him, but maybe he was just nice to Paul because Paul's Paul and everyone loves Paul. Yeah. But and Cross, had a high opinion of him and really wanted to face him. And I was just like, okay, maybe some of the things you read, out of context, people are at different points in their life, whatever it is, maybe you have to take people as individuals, unless they commit a crime. It's a whole other story. But, and there's also another really good story that came out of that show was we had somebody who was recommended to us, I believe, by Isaac Hayes, the referee, Isaac Hayes, who I think you've had on the podcast. Isaac's
I love Isaac.
Our two main referees are Odie Brown and Isaac.
I love Odie. Yeah,
Odie is, speaking of people who will promote your show and do everything in his power to get the show over so that everyone is, someone who believes in the rising tide lifts all boats, that would be Odie. And Isaac is just a character and he's a great guy. And, you know, every time I see him ref a match, I'm like, okay, this is why the referee is important. I see. So Isaac recommended this guy to us from who had, I don't know if he had graduated Santino's or he was graduating Santino's. And we were like, okay. And he's like, he'll come and he'll volunteer backstage. And he was a respectful, really good guy and just like helping with everything backstage. And then somebody who was supposed to be in a match he got injured the day before, although he wrestled the next day in AAA. Or not, maybe not in AAA. He may have wrestled for another promotion the next day. And we're like, okay, you're not available. So we're like, we have this spot available in the 6-man. I think it was because honestly he didn't want to be in a scramble match, which was a great match. Sean Black was in, actually. It turned out to be an awesome match, and that is one of my favorite matches. So we had a spot in it. But then also, Bob Holly and Cross wanted to open the show with a promo, and we wanted someone to interrupt them. We're like, hey, you want to do it? You seem to have the look for it. You seem to have the personality for it. Let's do it. And they're like, okay. Also, why don't you get involved in their match? That guy was Slice Boogie. And Slice is another one of those people who he's great at his character, but he's also great to work with. And he is going to be a star. He is already getting big. You see him on NWA now, and like he's getting that because I do think there's a certain aspect of if you can combine talent, a good look with professionalism, sky's the limit. And I think that's a very important thing to tell people. And I think I've been asked, I don't know why, people have asked me maybe like, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into wrestling? And I am not the person to ask because I am barely in it. But like maybe go and ask somebody who actually knows. Like if I'm standing next to Paul London, talk to Paul London. If you're standing next to Brandon, talk to Brandon. They will give you much better life advice. But the one thing that I've had is I've had people come up to me at other shows and be like, hey, how do I get booked at Maverick? And I'm like, I'm not the booker. That's Paul London. But I mean, I will recommend people to him. And one thing that I don't love is if I've never seen you at a Maverick show, why do you want to work at Maverick? You don't know the product. You just want another booking. So we are very fortunate to be in a great area, Southern California, with all these independent promotions. If you want to be booked by a promotion, go to the promotion. Meet them. That FaceTime, if you meet Paul London and he likes you and he sees something in you, you are so much more likely to get booked than if I send him a clip on YouTube. I understand there's also the financial aspect, but we always work out with that stuff. Like if you're a talent, if you're a student, there's a student rate to come to our shows, right? Do everything you can to be seen, to help out, to do the ring crew. And I know a lot of people say this, but like if you want to be booked by a specific promotion, go to that promotion as a fan or as someone who wants to help. Volunteer to be on ring crew. If they don't need you, pay for a ticket. That's my advice. Find a way to pay for a ticket. And that's the thing, because like if I am a hiring manager at the company I work for, why do you want to work here? It can't just be I want to do something in mobile gaming. It has to be because I know your product and because I know what you do. Like this is not specific to wrestling. This is just general. If you want to find a job, get to know the company you want to work for. That's my advice. Sorry, that was my rant.
No, I love it. I love it. As does Coach Rob up in Canada. Says Coach Rob approve. Woo! There's
awesome. I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you. No. Thank you, Coach Rob. I can use a lot of coaching. Thank you.
No, a talented MMA coach as well as a podcaster, impresario in his own right. So yeah, love that he's chiming on.
I've always wanted to learn to do a little bit of grappling and MMA stuff, for fitness. Not ever going to compete. I have no pain tolerance. Unfortunately, I had back surgery in December, so I'm not really sure what I can do. So the twisting and the rolling around might not be the best thing for me right now, but I do want to learn that stuff. But yeah, so, and I miss doing shows. I mean, I'm glad we're coming back from COVID. I really do miss doing shows, doing announcing, putting together shows. It is incredibly stressful.
But it's something that, again, the stress isn't unwarranted because what you get, just your soul, and you mentioned of, being a patron to the show, learning the product, right? Like, I think that's so important. But those are one of the many byproducts of just being able to show show up, even if you're not used, even whatever. Just
Yeah,
don't expect anything. A
yeah.
guy that I I'm good friends with, Blake Bulletproof Troop, an MMA
Oh yeah,
fighter. Yeah,
yeah.
this is somebody who like I was just like, hey, let's go to a wrestling show, and knowing he knew wrestling and everything, and his Bulletproof Troop character, yeah, and when he would be cutting promos, like I would help him kind of put together full on vignettes, like, for fights and shit like that.
I mean, Blake is a really interesting person because I think are you frozen? Are you there? Adam, I think I lost you because you are frozen. But the clock is still going. Am I supposed to cut a promo now? Is that what I'm supposed to do here? Well, it looks like I've lost Adam. So I'm going to patiently wait while I hear what he has to say and how we get back into this because this was a really great conversation and I'm really enjoying this. I hope everyone out there is enjoying the show. Thank you for those who have commented on the show. I really appreciate it. This is my first time, I think, first time in a long time doing a podcast. I've done one before, but this is the first one doing one with video. So this is very much a new dynamic for me. Let me just check if Adam has messaged me. I don't mean to be rude. Let's see what he has to say. Anyways, so hi, how's everyone doing? Please come into the comment section and let me know what's going on. Hopefully I can see the comments and maybe we can have a conversation since I don't know where Adam went. Isaiah and Rob, Coach Rob, I hope you're still watching. Haven't had the pleasure of formally introducing myself. I'm Aaron Glass. I am a commentator for Maverick Wrestling. I also am, I think my official title is, I'm a partner with focus in business development. Not really sure what that means, but help put the shows together, help look for sponsors. We're a promotion in Southern California, and we are our current heavyweight champion, since it was before the pandemic, is Karrion Kross. Our Revolution champion is Chris Bay, and our women's champion is Katarina Waters. Formerly Katie Lee Burchell, or Winter in TNA, if you will. Hopefully we'll be doing shows soon, and hopefully I will be hearing from Adam soon so we can resume this exciting podcast. I hope people are watching. I hope you were watching before this so that you actually got some information out of this. Adam's internet went down, so hopefully he will be rebooting. Let me see how he would like to proceed.
I am so sorry.
That's okay. Should I leave the studio?
Pulled all my shit out.
Oh God, that sucks. Do you want to come back into the studio, or should I leave the studio?
Whatever.
What would you like me? Like, I'm still on the studio feed on StreamYard. Would you like me to leave the stream?
Is it still on?
What? Yeah, the stream is still on.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's because I can't even end it because of the internet.
Do you want me to leave the studio? Like, it says leave studio as one of the options.